I've been studying what you would call anomalous healing, unconventional healing, whatever you want to call it, for about, I don't know, 95 years or so. And I'm trying to figure out a way to turn it into conventional healing. And the question is, what has to happen in order to do that? And I'll cut to the bottom line here, so you can leave early if you want to. If you want to make healing conventional, we need to do two things, and you want to keep these two things in mind. Healing has to be storable, and it has to be scalable. It's not now commonly storable, and it's certainly not now scalable in any empirically proven way. And so I'm trying to work on the storability and the scalability. The storability is not particularly new or revolutionary. And I'll just show a couple of pieces of research about what that means. The scalability, I think, that I'm working on is reasonably new. So if we think about healing, this is kind of like a model. This is just a Spotify picture ripped off. We have a healer and we have a healee. We, as most typical, we have one healer, we have one healee. You go one at a time, one at a time, one at a time, for reasons that don't make sense to me. The guy has his eyes closed and he's looking like this is something special. I don't consider healing to be particularly special. I think it's an ordinary process in nature. And the question is, how do we store it? How do we scale it? And the storage and scalability, I mean, we're used to this in other parts of the world. So we could take lightning. And can we take whatever lightning is, so let's assume we don't know, and can we bottle it? Can we store it? And the answer is, when we first thought of this a couple hundred years ago, no. But right now, technically, yes, you can store electricity. And so this, if I say I have a device that'll store electricity that you can bring to bear later on to get some electricity out of it, you'd yawn, you'd go, yeah, what's the big deal, et cetera, et cetera. You know, it's not a big deal because we have technical solutions. So this is storability, but we also can scale it. In other words, we can make a boatload of batteries. And you can go down to the store and pick up a package of batteries. And what is that basically? It's stored electricity. We can do this in biology. And so we're used to pills. These, I think, these are again ripped off pictures. I think this is probably fish oil. So we can take fish oil, put it into a pill. You can swallow the pill, and we can make a boatload of pills. I'm essentially trying to do the same thing with healing. So let me give you the plot about what I want to talk about. I'm going to give you a couple of very quick background to some previous healing studies I've done, and then I'm going to show you some experiments regarding storing healing, scaling healing, and then we'll see how this can all go together to change, I hope, the way that healing is looked at. So again, I've been doing this for, I think I underestimated with 95 years. I think it's probably 105 years. And I've spent a bit of time looking at the parameters of healing. And by parameters of healing, what makes it work stronger? What makes it work weaker? Does distance matter for a physical example? Does belief matter for a more psychological example? What are the things that make it work? What are the things that make it not work? I'm not going to talk about that stuff today. I've looked at physiological correlates to healing. So I've got a bunch of data using EEGs and functional MRIs and what happens to the body and what happens to the heart and what happens. I'm not going to talk about that today either. Development of a theoretical model. I can't talk about that today because I have no idea how this stuff works. I mean, that's the bottom line. So I've been doing this. I've been doing the research in healing to 130 years. I've met a lot of people doing research in healing. I've met a lot of people who think they understand how healing works. I've never found anyone give me a comprehensive and a satisfying theory of how healing works. It's unlikely to happen coming from me. So this is the scientific motherlode question. Can we figure out how this stuff works? And it turns out to be a pretty hard problem. But in the interim, the last bullet, can we make practical stuff? And that's really what I'm asking. Can we make practical stuff, even if we don't understand it? So if we go to, we don't understand, I mean, think of other examples. We don't understand gravity. You know, you put 10 theoretical physicists in a room, you ask what gravity is, you get a fist fight. But nobody denies there's gravity, and nobody denies that you can build stuff that will utilize gravity as an important variable. We can put 10 healers in a room and I ask, how does healing work? And we're going to get a fist fight. But nobody's going to deny there's healing. And the question will be, what makes it work strong? What makes it work weak, et cetera, et cetera. And whether we understand it or not, can we make something practical? So for 130 years, I worked on trying to figure out what it is. I'm only going to do this for another maybe 60, 70 years. And I've, in the interim, decided I'm going to work on, let's see if I can make some stuff. Let's go from basic research or include basic research, but let's go into an engineering kind of mode. So can we make practical applications? Can we capture and reproduce healing without the healer? Can we capture and reproduce electricity without it occurring in nature? Again, it's the exact same question. So I have a bunch of cancer experiments. These are mice experiments. I have a bunch of experiments on mice. I have a bunch of experiments on cancer cells. I have some recent studies on humans, clinical research and such. I'm going to talk about some of this. But just as a quick overview, these are selected cancer experiments in traditional biology laboratories, in traditional medical schools on cancerous mice of various stripes. So I've done a boatload of work on mammary cancer, a couple of experiments at City University, a couple of experiments at St. Joe's, an experiment at Arizona State, 3 at Indiana Med School, 5 at Brown University Med School. I've got a bunch of sarcoma studies. I've got oncogenic mice studies. I've got nude mice studies. I've got extremely aggressive, and Jeffrey warned me about the nude mice. He said, you're not supposed to show this at the conference. So all the pictures of mice I'm going to show you, they're fully clothed, don't worry. And I've recently done a bunch of experiments at Tokyo University. I've been around doing a bunch of stuff for 145 years. So let me show you the general idea. This is the healing model, if you will. I think in very simple terms, and I try to figure out what's the simplest way I can ask a question and what's the simplest way I can get an answer. So my simple question is this: can I take an already existing model that everybody thinks they understand, and I interject a single variable? And that's really all I do. I don't invent the model. I use stuff other people have invented. And so, for example, in the case of cancerous mice, we found a mouse model that anybody in oncology is going to know about because it's the most widely used model. There's over 2,000 publications on this model. 2,000 publications on this model. You get a mouse, particular type. You get a cancer, particular type. You do ugly things. You inject the mouse with cancer, and then you watch what happens. And what happens in this particular model, and again, it's ugly work, is that 100% of them die in a month. 100%. 2,000 published studies, 100% of them die. The question then for a researcher is, because it actually looks like a normal curve too, and it's a very tight model, standard deviation is only 3 days. Can you change the look of the curve? Can you turn this into a negatively skewed distribution and have the mice live longer? Can you get any mouse to live a full month? Can you know, and that's what traditional researchers do. So I take this model where they all die in a month, all of them die in a month, and I'll show you an example of a mouse about to die. I'm sorry for this in advance. This is an example of a mouse about to die. And you have here, if my pointer's in the right place, one big wonkin tumor that's actually eaten a leg. The fur's fallen out. The eyes are dull. You can't see the eyes from here. This is basically a dead mouse. And so this is what happens all over the world, and it's happened year after year after year, and we take nothing exotic. We take what's already off the shelf, and I introduce a single variable. The single variable I introduce is healing. So this is a picture of me at Brown University doing a study. I have other people, I have other faculty doing this, I have other students doing this, I got volunteers of all stripes doing this, but I don't want to out them, so I'll just put my picture in there. This is pre-COVID, incidentally. So although I look like I'm in a COVID hospital, this is before the COVID thing happened. So I take a mouse model that everybody knows what's going to happen. They're going to die, and they're going to die in a particular way, and they know the stages, and they know what's going to happen next, and I introduce healing. What happens then? And it turns out to be pretty interesting. So we get the tumor on a treated mouse grows, and then it develops a blackened area, and then it develops a slit, and then it develops a big ulceration. But what I don't have here is the next stage is implosion. And the next stage, implosion, it'll eventually look like the mouse never had cancer. There'll be no sign that the mouse ever had it. Further, and this is where we get pretty interesting, we can take blood from this mouse and put it in this mouse that's been treated and put it into an untreated mouse. No healing going on, but we inject some of the blood in there. That next mouse will be cured. In other words, this mouse has captured healing intention. In a weird way, because I'm talking about storing intention. Storing intention has been done, and it's been done in a mouse. And we're going to look at other ways that intention can be stored. So go back, think battery, storage, think mass production of battery, scalability. Can we do the same thing and produce a cancer cure? So I got a bunch. I just finished my 19th and 20th mouse experiment at Tokyo University. I've got at least 19 or 20 experiments on cell cultures, et cetera, et cetera. You get the general idea. Can we reproduce this without the healer? And if we stand back, we're going to see we got cures all over the place. And with some interesting side effects or lack of side effects. Distance is irrelevant. I can sit there and put my hands around a cage of mice, or I can do a cage of mice 2,000 miles away. Doesn't seem to make a difference. There is a dose response. It's not a field effect. Belief actually retards healing. Long pause, because that sounds heretical to some people. Skeptical people heal better than believers. And I can keep going on and on and on. But in my 145 years of doing this research, I would have a long list of things that I found, and I'm pretty conservative about what I claim. I need at least independent replication in 2 or more labs. What's a much longer list is what we don't know. And this, I just put up a couple of things to make a list, but I could make slide after slide after slide. If you look at a pile of things I think I know in healing, it's little. A pile of things that we don't know, it's going to be huge. I'm not going to run out of research questions. I'm not going to focus on this today. So if we're talking about healing and we're talking about making it conventional, what do we need? Well, it depends on your point of view. Depends on your background. If you're a researcher, if you're a scientist, what you'd really like is a theoretical explanation for how this stuff works. Nobody has it. I guarantee you nobody has it. We want really good data, and so we'd be data freaks, and we'd want to know how it works. If you're a normal person walking the street and you're asked about healing, you're probably going to be more amenable to personal experience. And if you're in need, you don't care what the reason is. So if I'm a person who has a physical need, I need healing, I'm not going to sit there and wring my hands and wonder, what is the theory behind all this and all? Can you fix me? I'm trying to figure out a fix me. Can I fix me? Can I take intention? And you can turn this into consciousness. Can I take intention? Can I take conscious intention and bottle it? And can I mass produce it? And the answer looking ahead will be yes. So can I store and reproduce this without the healer? And can we make it scalable? So I'm going to go a couple of quick illustrations of some storage questions. Organic storage. So we'll put it organically. Cotton. And I think I'm a little rectangle up there someplace or another. This is ordinary cotton. And the general idea is this. And I did this stuff at Brown University. You take a piece of cotton and you treat it. And what does treating mean? Nothing more exotic than I put my hands around it. I don't know if that's necessary. Put my hands around it, and I intend for healing information, healing stuff that I don't understand to now be in the cotton. Nothing more exotic than that. So I've got some cotton that's been treated and some cotton that hasn't been treated. Can I tell the difference? Well, the interesting thing is this. I've even taken cotton that's been treated and I've put it under an electron microscope. I'm crazy. I put it under an electron, is there any structural changes? Any of this happen? Does any of that happen? No matter what I do, I can't figure out, I can't tell the difference between treated cotton and untreated cotton. But if I take cancer cells in a well plate, a container, and I start to bring the cancer cells over to cotton that has been treated, then as the cancer cells approach the cotton that has been treated, they start to genomically change. If the cotton hasn't been treated, the cancer cells don't change. I can do this with other forms of microorganisms. I can get microorganisms with motility. They can swim. They'll swim towards treated cotton if they've been injured. They won't go towards treated cotton if they're not injured. There are clues here. There are clues. So we're storing something in cotton and we get the genomic changes and such. Another example of organic storage, cell medium. And this is ordinary cell medium. Every lab that does cell culture studies has this exact medium sitting in the lab. It's universal. What happens if you treat, and by treat I mean hold the cell medium? So you take the cell medium, you put your hands around it, you intend healing to be stored, if you will, in the cell medium, and then you ship the cell medium away to another lab. What happens if then you take a bunch of cancer cells and put it in that treated cell medium? Well, what happens is pretty interesting. The cancer cells treated in the treated cell medium go nuts. They go wild, exploding. They reproduce, and the average reproduction rate of treated cell medium cancer cells is an increase in reproduction of 600%. We're not talking little statistical effects. We're talking in your face, 2x4, real serious gross effects where the cancer cells that have been exposed to healing, once they have the healing information available to them, they use it to do what they like to do, which is grow. The next step, which I haven't done yet, is to take supercharged cancer and put it into a mouse. And my suspicion is it'll collapse because I think healing will go to the higher order need of the organism. But that needs to be determined. More organic storage. These are just pictures ripped off the internet. This is supposed to be a mouse. It actually looks more like a rat. So we've got here treated on the left, treated mouse with an ulceration like you saw. And over here, we have an untreated mouse, which has a big tumor that has not ulcerated. We treat one mouse, we take some blood, we put it into the untreated mouse, everybody gets cured. Now that's reasonably interesting. Again, storage. Storage in a life form, storage in cell medium, storage in cotton, all organic. What if we go to inorganic? So can you store healing intention in water? And the answer, you're probably not going to be surprised, is yes. And so these studies are done at the University of Connecticut Medical School. You hold the water, you intend on treating the water, you intend on the storage of healing intention, and then that water is taken and fed to cancerous mice that we've never met. And when we do that, those mice are cured too. Reasonably interesting. So we're talking storage, that doesn't mean it's scalable. We'll come back to water in a little bit, but right now all we have is, in essence, a reliable effect that you can treat water. That water, in fact, will store the information. That water will reproduce the healing without the healer, but that doesn't make it scalable. The question is, how do you make it scalable? So we'll be back to water in a few minutes. Here's maximum scalability. What if we just record it? So nothing more than, can we record healing intention? In the cotton, we were holding and intending healing intention. In the cell cultures, we were holding the cell cultures and intending healing intention. What if we just record it and make it pure? This is maximally scalable. So you can imagine, thought experiment only, you can imagine that we have a recording that will reproduce the original healing. The recording is maximally scalable. We can put this up into the cloud and have, in essence, global scalability. So I'm pursuing, in the attempt to store and scale, I'm pursuing maximally scalable approaches, less maximally scalable approaches, very good approaches which really store the healing intention, and those that are more or less scalable. So we're working on kind of balancing storage, scalability, and such. So here's a couple of experiments to be done very quick. Recording healing intention. Here's my team. Some of you may know some of these folks. Like Dean, second from the left, was one of our speakers yesterday. Guy to the right of him is Mike Turner. He's got a PhD in signal analysis, and he's anyway. This is the team I have. So what we did is this, nice and simple. What happens, since we know that we can store healing in cotton? What happens if we go inside a Faraday cage with cotton, multiple people, and they all do the healing technique, and we run recording? Not more exotic than that. What is exotic is the stuff we put in it. So this is a big wonkin Faraday cage, which is going to filter out a good chunk of electromagnetic signals, keep the signal pure. And inside this Faraday cage, we put a bunch of stuff. We put a bunch of stuff, we put a bunch of stuff, we put a bunch of stuff. We got 38 detectors, and the reason we have 38 detectors, we don't know what we're doing, so we're throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks. So we're putting even down to scalar field detectors, a caduceus antenna, and we got electromagnetic this and magnetometers there and geomagnetometers in the other place, and etc. And we got 38 detectors inside the Faraday cage running their detection, filtered through a computer, downloaded into a WAV file. And what happens if we take this recording, which you can't hear incidentally, what happens if we take this recording and we play it to mice, or we play it to cells? So here's an experiment. We have an incubator, we have speakers, we have an amplifier, and down at the bottom we have cancer cells and traditional kinds of stuff. Now, some of this is actually pretty funny. To make the recording was very expensive, very expensive. No matter what you're thinking, it was more. The speakers are $49 from Amazon, which we bought because they'll fit in the incubator. The amplifier was $49 because we figured, why not? We're cheap. But this was hundreds of thousands of dollars to make the recording. And then we got down here a bunch of cancer cells. And the cancer cells listen, using that loosely, to the recording of healing intention. And we look at the genes there, and we looked at 167 genes. And what we found was reasonably interesting. In 7 replications, 60, so it's not, this isn't a casual, oops, I wonder if it's an artifact. In 7 replications, we have 68 genes which genomically change. When they listen to I'm using loosely, when they listen to this recording. And we did the recording at various intervals, and it's a little more complex than I'm putting up here. So we looked at 167 genes. We found 68 reliable gene changes in the 167 that we looked at. And looking for a mechanism of action, we're saying what happens, what was stimulated, what was upregulated, what was downregulated. And it's reasonably interesting. So generally speaking, I could do details with you offline, but generally speaking, immune functions are upregulated. Apoptosis, programmed cell death, is upregulated in cancer cells. Now, cancer cells are pretty interesting. They've been described as immortal. Most of the cells in your body commit suicide every certain amount of interval. Cancer doesn't like to kill itself. It's immortal. It likes to reproduce. When we expose cancer cells to this recording, they lose the interest, using that loosely, they lose the interest in reproduction. Telomere length is affected, apoptosis is affected, a variety of things are affected. We're trying to get to the underlying mechanism of what happens when this kind of healing actually occurs. This became a pretty good paper that the team put together the interesting thing is it's published in a traditional biology journal. So we're talking about hocus pocus craziness of taking intention, storing it, and reproducing it in a recording and playing it to cancer cells. Most biologists wouldn't be saying this is a good idea. But in this particular case, they said, yeah, you have the data. And so we published this, which again, reasonably interesting. I'd be happy to ship anybody any of the actual publications. And we had some conclusions that I'll do very, very quickly. Let's just say it's a demonstration that there is an intention capture possible. So if we're talking storage and reproduction without any human intervention and calling that a technical innovation, we have a technical innovation. We have a technology of healing. The technology of healing may be in its infancy. You know, think first car off the assembly line to a modern car. There's a technology that you can work on to make it better and better and better. So I'm hoping to be working down one road because it's maximally scalable and see if I can get this thing, because if we can do this and we can make the recording as good as live, it becomes globally scalable. That would be a wonderful thing. It's not as good. So it does really interesting stuff. It produces reliable genomic changes. It does this, it does that. But we have some indication that it's not as strong as doing it live. If we take the same cancer cells and put our hands around it, we get faster and stronger responses doing it live than we do through this digital recording. How do we make it stronger? That's an ongoing research question. The fourth conclusion up on the slide here, we did not publish because it's a little too controversial, and this would be pushing the envelope a little too far. And that is, once we run the recording, even though we can't hear it, once we run the recording, the space in which it's been recorded will now produce anomalous responses. So, in English, we can turn off the recording, take out the cancer cells out of the incubator. If we play the recording to an empty incubator, turn it off, wait a few days, and then put some cancer cells in, they still genomically change. That's reasonably interesting. So the question is, how far up can we take this? And so this is also at Brown. Can we do it with mice? And so let's play the recording to mice. And so this is the same speakers, the same amplifier, the same everything, except now instead of playing it to cancer cells, we're playing it to cages of mice. And what happens? Well, we ran into some problems at Brown because the animal ethics people didn't like what we were doing, even though we told them what we were doing. But the mice started to develop ulcerations, and the tumors started to explode as if you were doing hands-on. But the animal ethics people came in and shut me down. And actually, they came in and they, more accurately to say, they killed the mice. That was a bad thing. Nonetheless, the mice were exhibiting no signs of stress, no signs of illness, but the animal ethics people came in and whacked them anyway. We saved what we could save, and this turned into another interesting paper, also in a traditional biology journal. And so without the details of all the this and the that, we have a list of biological changes which occurred in the mice as a result, not of getting a healing, if we think of that as human to human, or human to mouse, or human to whatever, simply stimulated by a recording. And so, again, the details of that are reasonably interesting. We needed to replicate this and carry it all the way, And so I spent actually a couple of years looking for a lab that would do this and could carry this out a little bit farther. And we finally came up with one at Tokyo University, where we've just finished a bunch of experiments doing essentially the same thing, doing it though to multiple mouse models of cancer. So not just this kind, but this kind, that kind, the other kind. And this, I'll just say there were a whole bunch of significant effects. The significant effects are in a paper that's out for peer review right now. I'm reasonably confident it will be peer reviewed positively. I know that because I've been through one iteration already, and it's going to be coming out also in a traditional biology journal. So the recording, short version, the recording seems to be, the good news, maximally scalable. The bad news, it needs work. It'll still do interesting stuff. We'll still get reliable effects on cells. We'll still get reliable effects on mice, but it's not as good as live. So we haven't captured it. We've captured something. We've captured something on the way to it, but we're not done. It would be wrong to say, let's pack up and go home. We solved this. We didn't solve it yet. We're on the right road, and we have really good indicators that it's possible to do. So the recording, maximally scalable. What if we go back to something slightly less scalable? And now I'm going to come back to water. So we've already seen and showed you before, if we treat some water and we give it to cancerous mice we've never met, and they just drink the water in their cages, they get cured. Well, that's terrific. And the water seems to be as strong as any original effect. That's even more terrific. But water is harder to mass produce. It's harder to scale. If we're looking at, is it storable? Yep. Is it scalable? Nah. At least as compared to something like a recording. Recording is maximally scalable, but it's so far, it's storing something, but it's not storing enough. We can't walk away and go home. So we started to play around with water. And because we already had a background in water studies, and I have more, but we have a background in water studies, is there any way to take the treated water and enhance it and to scale it? And so we started looking around at some various systems that attempt or allege to do something similar, scaling water-based products. And we got pushed in the direction of homeopathy. I'm not a homeopath. I don't know if I could even spell homeopathy correctly, but in homeopathy, you're taking water and diluting, or you're diluting with water, and you're seriously diluting with water. Sometimes the serious dilution is so far that there's no original molecules other than water left. And this water, according to homeopathy, can be mass produced. So can we borrow, so to speak, the methods used in homeopathy, and will that enhance or help capture healing? And so we did some serial dilutions and succussions, and I had to work with some intuitives to help us sort combinations, because you get too many possibilities. And it turns out, yes, you can. So it's interesting. And we settled on a promising formulation, which we're calling Restore, which is treated water that has been diluted and succussed many, many, many times, and then stuck into a device. And the physical device, it's an actual mechanical device, alleges, and I helped design this, it alleges if you put water in, it does stuff on the inside of the device, and it takes on the information. In our terms, it takes on the healing intention of the original treated water, and it spits out in large quantities treatable water. So we've got Restore, we've got a different formulation we're calling Perform, and we've got one called Recover. And these are all nothing but water that has informed healing intent in it, one for general health, one for athletic performance, one is an antiviral. And we've bottled this. Here's healing in a bottle. And so the question is, what can you do with this? Well, we can mass produce it, and we got to find out, is this thing really as good as the original? So I've done 3 pilot clinical studies of about 100 people each, all of whom had serious conditions. So we did 2 studies in the States and 1 in Europe, and these are people who have a need, and we asked them to take these various combinations of water sublingually 4 times a day, 2 drops at a time for 8 weeks. And we measured a whole variety of things at baseline, at 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and 8 weeks. And the results are disturbing because it's almost like too much. 98% of the approximately 300 people reported improvements in their health. Virtually everybody wants more water. They say something happened, something changed, but it varied what changed. There were significant increases in their physical condition. Sometimes long-standing physical problems went away. Psychological conditions, spiritual conditions. We got people, bipolar, for example, getting off their meds after taking the water. We got people with Parkinson's getting out of their wheelchair and walking a mile at a time. We've got changes in depression and anxiety. I mean, it's hard to take in, but what it's suggesting, and it's what's being suggested strongly, is that we've captured something. And it seems to be capturing something that's at least as strong and maybe in some cases stronger than the original hands-on treatment. Reasonably interesting. And we've taken this we did this with Restore, with Perform. It's a relatively small number of athletes, but we randomly and blindly gave the Perform water to athletes, and then they're measuring if they're weightlifters, how much weight can they lift, if they're joggers, how fast or how far can they go, if they're marathoners, what was their time, et cetera, et cetera. We measured oxygen intake. We measured a bunch of things blinded, and the results are startling. Sublingual drops of treated water, diluted and succussed, and stuck through a device. We've done a whole bunch of series on plants. So we've gone to a tulip factory, and we put a couple of drops of the various treated water into their water system, and we have a wild change in what the plants look like. They grow better, they're stronger, they're bigger. You get the idea. And I just finished, and it's out for peer review also, some experiments on COVID, and now going back to clinical. So this is, if I do say so myself, a beautiful study. Well, I got people going into the hospital for COVID to volunteer. They're going into a hospital, they'll be treated medically, but will they also volunteer to be part of a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study? So this is methodologically pure. 160 people on their way into a COVID hospital, 80 of them randomly assigned, going to take sublingual drops. 80 of them randomly assigned will take untreated drops. Everybody's doing the same thing. Physicians are actually giving this out to the patients. Nurses are actually giving this out to the patients, and they're keeping the logs and they're keeping the thing. The nurses and the doctors didn't know what's in it. The patients didn't know what was in it. I never went to the hospital. Data dump, and the data dump are pretty startling. Significant differences between treated and control groups. These are people going in for COVID. We had significant general feeling, temperature, sore throats, coughs, PCR positivity, extraordinary effects on those, and no differences in some areas. Headaches, fatigues, aches, eyes, shortness of breath. It turns out the people going into the hospital on this last bullet had some minor, compared to what's happened to some of the COVID folks, had minor symptoms. If there were minor symptoms, the drops didn't help all that much. If there were serious symptoms, for example, sore throats, the drops helped tremendously. Coughs, the drops helped tremendously. Positivity, you take the drops, within a couple of days, the positivity goes to negativity. If you don't have the drops, you don't change the negativity on the PCR. The general feeling of health, it mattered very strongly. Again, this is double-blind, placebo-controlled, the whole thing. And if we look at just one variable, general health, here, there's no difference between the treated and untreated. They're just coming into the hospital, and their general health stinks. And by day, for reasons that I don't need to go into, this is really the first day that after the first day they're in the hospital, immediately the two groups start to diverge. And the ones who have taken the drops are going towards greater health faster and faster. We can look at this with error bars, and we can see that very quickly there's a statistically significant change. There's a significant difference between those people taking the treated drops and those people taking the untreated drops. So I'm trying to build, here's the real short version. I'm trying to build a scalable system that's very effective. And so, for example, hands-on treatment, which you saw in one of the first pictures, is very effective, but it's not scalable. A recording that you saw is very scalable, but it's a little less effective than the hands-on. The resonant water seems to be strong and scalable. Not as scalable as a recording, but it's up there. And I've done some different kinds of recordings that I'm not going to talk about here. So cotton and treated water, for example, very, very effective. If you put cotton on an injury, you're going to have essentially the same effect as if you got a hands-on treatment. But the cotton, although effective, isn't particularly scalable. If you take water and you drink the water and the water's been treated, it's extremely effective. But if you drink the water and you put it through the water that's been treated doesn't necessarily treat other water. The gizmo that we invented will enable you to treat other water. So how do we make all this stuff scalable, effective, and widely available? It's the same question as, could I take nutrients, put it in a pill, mass produce the pill, and if you want, take the nutrients? Could I take electricity, store it, build a whole bunch of storage facilities, and have a battery factory? And will that reproduce? Yes. In order to become conventional, we have to move away from this is, I wonder what, your hand wringing and all this kind of stuff. Belief. Do you believe in healing? Who cares? Do you believe in batteries? I mean, it's a stupid question. Do you believe in gravity? So this slide is a work in progress. We've also got high success in all sorts of experiments, hands-on treatment, cotton and treated water, resonant water. Resonant water is preferable to this because it's more scalable. So how do we make it conventional? Well, we got to store it, and apparently we can do it with water. What else? We can hopefully do it in a recording. What else? To be determined. What happens, possibilities, can you imagine a future where healing intention has been captured, been mass produced, and we condition the space of a treatment room? So the recording played in a room will linger in the room and produce significant biological effects which are reliable. What happens if we condition the space and we're a clinician and we condition the space of our client. What happens if we supply them with treated water? What happens if we supply them? We need a whole bunch of interaction things. Can the recording and or the drops enhance clinical outcomes? Can this become ordinary? In the same way, have an antibiotic, have a healing. The intention has already been captured. The intention has already been scaled. Can we turn this into something that's normal? So thank you to a whole bunch of places that have been very generous with me and funding and things along those lines. I just like this. This is, somebody made this for me. I think it's a copyright violation. When Dr. Bengston comes in, everybody play dead. It's supposed to be a joke. And if you want to get a hold of me, here are ways to get a hold of me. Thank you, and I'll take any questions. Did I make it in a good time? Yeah, I think I did.
You did. Yeah, you really did. Good job, Bill.
I'm usually on the money.
Well, I know you have you can talk for hours about your results. So
I'm usually on the money for this. So let me stop the share and go back here and see if anybody has any questions and that I can answer. I think I got about 10
I'm
minutes.
sure we're going to have a lot. There are a bunch in the chat too. We'll probably just take some voice ones here for a while. Okay.
You draw the questions.
Thanks. Cool. Janan, I think you're first. If I said that right, is that how you say your name?
Yes, it's French. It's fine. Yeah. So again, wonderful. I mean, I've read some of your research. I'm fascinated by that. And what I want to say is that in my own journey, because I've been exploring anti-healing and therapeutic touch because it's something of interest to me. And what I've discovered early on, and that was around like 2012, is that yes, if you're doing like hands-on healing, after a while your hands hurt. You're doing a lot of them, it's just too much. You can't do one at a time. So an acquaintance of mine told me that you could record the energy. So I said, okay, let me try that. So I took like a high quality recorder and I put my hand where you pick up the voice and I put it there. And then I uploaded it, sent it, and it does work. I discovered like that in 2013, 2012. And then, and I've tried even with YouTube, you put a aura cleansing video and it actually works. And you can actually turn up the volume. If you want something stronger, you just turn up the volume. And even in terms of, in terms of doing in a room, yes, I played in my living room. It's if I want to do a deeper meditation, I condition the room to have that frequency. And, you sleep better as well. Like you don't need to sleep 8 hours, 5.5 hours. You're totally rested because you conditioned your bedroom.
I just did an experiment yesterday. We meet the people who use my healing method, and it's public stuff. People who use my healing, a few hundred people got together yesterday, and we did exactly that. We collectively tried to zap our cell phones and record something, but we did it with a specific task in mind. So we did a control run of recording where we're not doing anything. We did a control run where we're trying, and then we did a control run where we had a specific intention for a specific outcome, and we're playing around. And so I think there's
it's something that
sound studios too, just
but the thing is,
studios.
It's very simple in the sense that I didn't spend a lot of money. It's just a recorder. It takes 10 minutes. You upload it, MP3. You email it to someone, and here we go. And what I found with energy healing is that you can have an intention. Like I want it to be sent to a shoulder or a body part, but the energy like scans the whole body and finds it and does its own thing. Like you don't have to know where the problem is. It does it on its own. And the other aspect also is that the person who is sending the healing, the energy has to be healthier and stronger than the person receiving it. So if someone who is a low energy sends me their recording, it's not going to do anything for me. You know what I mean? So in other words,
I've been testing this. One of the things that I don't have is a chargeometer or a healometer or whatever you want to call it. So I've just gone into the lab and done genomic stuff here and there and like that. And what I found so far is the kind of down and dirty recording that you're talking about, without the crazy bells and whistle. It works, but it's not as strong.
Oh no,
And
it is
so
very
I'm
strong.
building a
It's,
hierarchy of, I'm
no,
trying to build a
yeah,
hierarchy of strength.
yeah. In other words, what I'm saying is that if, let's say, and what I've noticed when I would send because most people won't believe you. So I would send the YouTube video. I'm like, okay, watch it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I would say in 95% of the time, their breathing rate would dramatically reduce. So what I'm saying is that what I've noticed with time is that to know if someone can heal you, it seems that it has to do with the resting breathing rate, their probably brain coherence, something. So in other words, the person who's healing you has to have a more coherent, healthier energy than the person receiving it.
I would
And
disagree.
and I've done it over and over time. And all
Yeah.
I'm saying is, and I know it sounds like crazy, but the thing is that time and time again, and some people have like, I would take I took a class and they would match people. Okay, well, do a healing on this person and the person does a healing on you. No, there's always one person healing the other because they has either like a stronger energy. If you have the same healing, it doesn't, it's like putting hot water into hot water or cold water into cold water. There needs to be a difference for it to happen.
We're going to have to respectfully disagree.
Okay, yeah.
Because I've taken people who are sick and used them as healers, and they heal just as well.
Oh, no, I'm saying is that if the person, for example,
who are well.
No,
and the second thing that we're going to disagree on is that there's energy. I don't think there's any energy in energy healing at all.
Yeah, it's possible, but I'm just going to
report what I've got to cut you off. Let's get some other questions in here. Thank you for popping in. Terry, go ahead.
Dr. Bengston, thank you. Big thanks. Your work also helps with life transitions. I joined a Bengston practice group because I had studied with David Snyder, who really highly values your work. And I was having trouble clearing title for a Chicago condo I'd had for almost 40 years. And I just kept cycling, the way the 20 items and then I also added Silva, which helped me, may not be necessary for most people. And the condo closed this week.
Good.
So thank you. Thank you. So healing in all aspects are possible.
Who knows? Who knows the limits? We got to play.
Thank you.
We don't know too much.
Thank you, Terry. Jonathan?
Hi, Dr. Bengston. Couple of quick questions. First of all, the water is available at bengsproducts.com?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not involved with it at all. That sounds about right, though.
Okay.
And if not, you could go to my website, bengstonresearch.com, and there'll probably be some links. I'm not familiar with what's on my website either. I just found out about the internet yesterday.
It seems like publicity and money would be helpful for your kind of research. I assume you're interested in both, and I'm wondering if you'd want help with the publicity type of stuff.
I'm pretty well funded. I've been fortunate, knock on wood or something, that people keep throwing money at me, and I take contributions only if there's no strings attached.
How about things like celebrity endorsements or people who are well known? Would that be?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be famous. The last thing I need is a boatload of people, coming along saying I need a treatment. I've got enough people I've trained that I ship them all out because I don't do clinical stuff really. But it probably would be useful if I was trying to market the water. Right. And that eventually will happen. If you have some ideas and want to let me know and we can talk offline, that'd be great. Okay. But I personally don't seek fame, and I'm pretty well funded.
Okay, great. And the last quick question: in doing the cycling, is it useful to even have the pictures after a while, or is it more like you're tuning into an energy once you've done fast cycling?
When you do cycling, there's no images. You're going too fast. It just takes a while to get there.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Bina.
Okay, so I have sort of a two-part question, and that is, scalability seems to me to be about people. So if people are trained to do it within their own home, wouldn't that be a scalable way to heal humanity? And the second thing is, so I want to know your thoughts about people being trained within their own homes to create their cotton or create their water or create. And the other thing you mentioned was there's no energy and energy healing. So if you could explain that, I'd love that too. Thanks.
The first one is scalability, but if you're doing it in your own home, it's the scale isn't that high. You know, that's all I'm talking about. Because there's an inexhaustible supply of people in pain out there. You know, it's astonishing. No matter how good you can get, no matter how many people you teach, no matter what you do, they just keep coming. It's astonishing how much need there is out there. So I'm looking at something. You know, imagine it's just a thought experiment at this point. But imagine I could get some real efficacy out of the recording, and I put it into the cloud, and you would be able to simply download a cure. You know, that's serious scalability. Right now, I could probably service at least a few 100 million people with the water. You know, I know how to scale it that big, but I still still the recording would be stronger. You know, if you do your family, that's a beautiful thing. But it's, you know, what about the next family? You know, that's what I mean. The energy part is...
Well, the hope would be that, yeah.
The energy part is simple in the sense that if you're talking about energy and you have anything even remotely approaching the classical idea of what energy is, then, I mean, if I shine a light at you and I start walking away, the light gets dimmer. If I shine, you know, if a sound and the sound gets dimmer, everything diminishes with distance, with energy, with a pretty simple formula, and healing doesn't. And if something can go, if I'm in New York, if you set up a cage of mice in California, I get the same result as if the cage of mice is right in front of me. And if I were also, for different reasons of energy, there would be not only a diminution because of distance, but how in heaven's name could I go and hit this cage in California and miss this cage? You follow? How do I target? If it's energy, energy will start to go out as a field effect. I have some really good experiments, I have to say. I have some really good experiments that suggest very strongly that healing is not a field effect. It doesn't just expand and anything in your sphere of influence will be influenced. It's not that way at all. It's actually targeted. One of your members, actually, I don't know if Amance is here, Amance Barus, has a wonderful conceptualization of meaning fields, which is closer to my experimental outcome than is anything approaching an energetic explanation.
So what's on the recording?
Information.
Vibrational information.
I don't know. I think in some forms of recording there'd be vibrational information. On some there wouldn't. It doesn't seem to matter. But if it was energy... Now I have a book called The Energy Cure. So there's a certain irony to what I'm saying. And when I first got the cover and the publisher, I saw The Energy Cure, I said, I don't think there's any energy. And the publisher said, thanks for your input. They didn't care because everybody knows it as energy cure and everybody calls about energy healing, but I don't think there's any energy. That's not a put down. It's just that I don't think it's energetically based.
Okay, Bill, let's get to a few. I've got to cut you off here, Dana. Let's let some other questions in here. So a few that I'm picking out. Is the recording available? Someone asked.
No. It's experimental. If we want to set up to do an experiment, yes, but I don't think it's sufficiently ready for widespread distribution. The water is. The water we've tested. You know, we just have some anecdote other than the cell culture studies, you know, et cetera, on the recording and on the mice. We don't have clinical, so I don't know if it's good or bad. I know there's no side effect to the water. I know that it'll take care of COVID. I know that it'll take care of, I think, any flu. I know that, you know, there's a lot of stuff we can fix and that it has been widely tested experimentally and clinically, but the recording is still in the experimental stage and it's not done.
Okay. What about playing back other frequencies rather than using a cheap speaker? If you recorded a bunch of different frequencies, why not have an apparatus that plays back a broader range of the electromagnetic spectrum?
Well, it turns out, and this is a little bit preliminary, but it turns out that if you're looking at the electromagnetic spectrum and you're looking at vibrations and such, that, I mean, I'm reasonably heretical. Lower frequencies are more powerful than higher frequencies. You know, when people say raise your frequency, my data, and it's all in geekland here, my data indicate exactly the opposite. Lowering frequencies is a preferable method to go to increase efficacy. And among the layered anomalies that occur in my recording are this. The real interesting anomalistic output, and this is by a guy with a PhD in signal analysis, is at extremely low frequencies, and the extremely low frequencies can't be played over the speakers that I have that you saw.
Right.
They're 4 inches. In order to play our recording and actually capture the whole thing, the speaker would have to be bigger than this room. It certainly wouldn't fit in an incubator, and you wouldn't have any sound and nothing like that. And that seems to be, efficacy goes up as frequency goes down. That's preliminary. That's not nailed with independent replication in multiple labs. That's my current working hypothesis, and it may be wrong. You know, right now it's what I got. I'll probably be different next week.
Okay, great. It's someone asked, you have a high success rate as an individual. What about others using your method?
Experimentally, they seem to be just as good. Clinically, they're probably better, but just because they like people. I'm trying to save rodents. You know, they care about people. And so an interesting thing that I found, and this is also heretical, I've tested different kinds of people, giving them cages of cancerous mice. And there's I'll call it a personality continuum. You can go from extremely sensitive people, and you know, they're sensitive sometimes to the point where they can't function. And probably everybody has met one. You know, they're seeing auras and they're hearing sounds, and they're in the DSM manual all over the freaking place. You know, so by conventional standards, these are pathological sensitives who have social problems because of the way they're built. And you follow that continuum to the other side, and you have insensitive bricks, and they don't feel anything. You know, and they get cages of mice. Well, the pathological sensitives, when they do the technique of cycling and they put their hands around a cage, something overcomes them and they're flopping on the floor and they're going in this and that, and and you go to the bricks and you say, "What'd you feel when you treated the mice?" And their answer is, "What? What do you mean?" You know, like that. They heal just as well. Now we look at the sensitives who are flopping on the floor and see auras and hear sounds and all that stuff, and think we invert the causal sequence. We think that that's the way, the prerequisite. I have to become spiritual in order to heal. I have to become sensitive. You don't. I mean, you just don't. And again, that's not a supposition on my part. This is a seriously tested hypothesis.
Okay, great.
We are drawn to the sensitives because they can do stuff we can't see. And we think that that's somehow related to healing. It's not.
All right. Someone asked about whether or not you could store the healing in human blood transfusion. In other words, could I give a pint of blood or something and have the healing stored in that, and then store that blood in a blood bank and, get it back later and have it be healing for me or for others?
Simple answer from an empirical point of view is I don't know. It's a good question. My guess would be yes, you could. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to store. I mean, we haven't found many things you can't store this in. So we're storing it, in a WAV file, for crying out loud. We're storing it in a mouse. We're storing it in a person. We're storing it in inorganic material. We're storing it in organic material. We're storing it all over the place. I don't know the rules of storage, but I got to tell you that there's probably something that will store in just about anything, but I suspect that the continuum will be the efficacy of its application. So water is probably better than some other substance. Cotton is particularly good. Again, that doesn't solve the scalability problem, but cotton really works. Water really works. and we can mass produce water.
Final question. Why can't you just do this for all water or for the whole world, or, you know, visualize everyone getting the healing? Or why is it even necessary to have a storage and distribution system?
Yeah, that one goes to an ethical question. One, in my way of being in the world, it would be unethical to try to save the world. The species doesn't seem to be running towards healing or health or anything else, and to insert health when someone hasn't asked is an ethical problem. The more empirical problem is that there is a dilution effect someplace in there, meaning we can take water that's been treated and dilute it and succuss it and, you know, do that kind of a model and really take it out to extremes. But I would be seriously skeptical if I took this diluted water ready and I took it to the ocean and I put a drop in. I don't think I'd save all the fish. You know, there is some dilution ratio here or some series of understandings that I don't have nailed down. So the first one is ethical. I don't think it's ethical to fix someone against their will or without their permission, as long as they're capable of doing it. You know, if someone's in a coma, bring them out of the coma, that's fine. But put them back in if they don't like it. If someone is a little kid, you don't ask permission. But if someone is a big kid, you ask permission. So fixing people, I don't think is even a morally acceptable anything.
We have one more person who'd like to ask a question, and I'm going to go ahead and let him. Stephen, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you very much, Jeffrey. Mr. Bengston, your work is fascinating.
Thank you.
And I'm thrilled with it because I've done a lot of somewhat similar work, trained decades ago by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And the scalability or ability to radiate this effect, the basic example is the sun itself. So we know that the sun, without the sun's radiation, we'd all die very quickly. So there is that potential. So it's a matter of a balance between whoever is radiating a beneficial effect and the receivability or receptibility of the people or the patient. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm just being cautious. I don't think healing is a radiating effect. So the analogy, I think, breaks down. This is really fast. These are real experiments. Bunch of cages here. They're being treated by volunteers, and et cetera, et cetera. And then we put control mice or other mice in our experiment far away. And there are other mice in between here and there. These mice get cured, those mice get cured, the ones in the middle are unaffected. If they're not part of our, I gotta say, consciousness. Yeah. If it's not part of the consciousness of the mice, if it's not part of the consciousness of the experimenters, just putting something in, we don't seem to be radiating beneficence, you know, that kind of stuff. There seems to be a much more interesting targeting experience than this kind of neutral radiation. So the sun is neutrally radiating, you know, no matter who you are, you're still getting sun stuff. But by the same token, plants will deal with the sunlight differently than will mammals. You know, so what you do with it is going to vary. But the sun is an offering. I think that healing is partly an offering and an acceptance, and the acceptance is probably helping with the target rather than a generic field effect.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. It is, humans can radiate a degree of beneficence, depending on their ability, but also the receptivity. So part of the healing situation is actually training people to be more receptive to the beneficence that's radiated. And people can also train themselves, learn to be able to draw more energy directly, more beneficial energy directly from the sun.
Okay.
Well, I would love to see you partake in some of your experiments, because it's a field that's totally interesting to me, and it is the next wave of how situations of health can be remedied. People can be brought to a much bigger scale. That make sense?
We'll see where we go. We'll see where we go. But by all means,
Sounds like a great note to end on.
if you want to play, contact me. Go through the website, give me an email, and we'll start to discuss.
All right,
And can you say the website again, Bill, just one last time?
Bengstonresearch.com. Bengston Research is one word, .com.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's really great having you. Really appreciate it. As you know, followed your work for 20 years or something at this point, since whenever we first met, somewhere in the early 2000s, I think. Really appreciate you coming. Really appreciate you speaking to the society.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Great talk. I'll see you sometime again soon, I'm sure.
That's right. That's right.